And we have great kids, but sometimes kids make not so great choices. And I think as parents, we always want to know as much as we can. So just a quick show of hands. How many of you have ever uttered something like this before? I'm sure glad that I didn't have these when I was a kid. Yeah, me too, okay? And one of the things that I find is that our kids, a lot of times, they're not the best decision makers at this age. Great kids, but sometimes they just make not so great decisions. And so I think our job as adults, educators, parents, is to kind of help our kids navigate through some of these choices and just be aware, okay? That knowledge is power kind of thing. So I'm going to introduce Mr. Chris McKenna. Chris wants to make sure kids are protected from online harm and learn to use technology in positive ways. Using experience gleaned from a 12-year career with Ernst & Young and 6 years in full-time middle school ministry, Chris created Protect Young Eyes as a way to equip and encourage parents and students to use technology responsibly. Chris's research has helped countless families around the country with a presentation team that performs hundreds of talks at schools and churches every year. Chris is regularly featured on news, radio, podcasts, and most recently on Capitol Hill for his research. The hashtag Fix App Ratings movement, started in partnership with Protect Young Eyes, led Chris to testifying on July 9, 2019 for the Senate Judiciary Committee's hearing on protecting childhood innocence. Multiple resolutions are now in process as a result of this hearing at the national and state levels. Protect Young Eyes is determined to push forward with efforts to replace or update decades-old legislation that no longer provides adequate safeguards for our children. You can visit his team at protectyoungeyes.com. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our keynote speaker, Mr. Chris McKenna.
Thank you. Thank you. Hey, everybody. Yeah, it's good. Hi. How about that weather, right? So I'm from Michigan, and so weather is just a part of us. We're used to waking up, and if you don't like what it's like when you wake up, in Michigan we just say, wait till lunch, it'll be something different. It'll be a whole different, climate zone. So this morning at 4 a.m. I woke up to 6 fresh inches of snow on my car, then wondering if I'm going to make it out, so they de-iced the airplane, and I got here, and then somewhere in the air around Kentucky, the air decided to turn into something less smooth than air, and we were given warnings to all hold on tight, and we weren't given any beverages because they were going to spill everywhere. And so you had some tornado action downtown exactly the moment when I was trying to land. So I went from 6 inches of snow to 6 inches of rain, and I'm so glad that you ventured out in all of that. We have a lot to cover tonight. In the note-taking guide that you got, there are notes that we'll go through, but friends, at the end of the day, there are so many topics that I want to cover. I'd love to have all day with you, but we can't. And so I get to skim over a lot of things, and then in the process of doing that, I'm going to point to places where you can go to find more information, depending on whatever situation you're in. If you're a parent, a grandparent, or maybe you're both of those things. You may go, oh, that topic is one I want to know more about. Great. I will show you where to find more information, because we can only go so deep in the time that we have here. And if time permits, we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A at the end. But you've all got multiple ways to get in touch with us as an organization. We are multiple people. In the upper right-hand corner of the note-taking guide with Protect Young Eyes, you'll see there's an email address. I think my phone number might even be on there. There's all kinds of ways to keep in touch, because what often happens in a talk like this is you soak it all in. It's sort of like drinking from the fire hose, a little bit overwhelming, and then you go home and with some clarity you go, oh, now I have a question about that, and I want us to be a resource for you. We answer those kinds of questions from parents all the time. And for the young people in the room, please understand, this is not a presentation that's intended to make all of your parents go home and smash your iPhone. This is not that presentation. I am pro-technology. The iPhone in my back pocket is an extension of me. I love it, okay? And so I want this to be something that initiates conversation, not something that creates more of a divide between us. When I look at the relationship that needs to exist between parents and kids in the digital age. You promise me that? No smashing the iPhone when you get home. Okay, promise me that. So we are Protect Young Eyes. I want to introduce you. This is my family here. This is Andrea and I. We've been married for 20 years. My daughter Lauren, she's a freshman. I'm from Grand Rapids area, so Caledonia is our school system there. So I have a freshman. Then I have twin boys. Believe it or not, my twins are these two guys over here. Mr. Grumpy Pants. This is the picture where I say that 83% of us are pleased. the other 17%, namely Grant. So we were blessed with fraternal twins. Grant was born with Down syndrome. His fraternal twin, Cole, was not. I didn't even know that was possible until that's what happened. I mean, we knew we were having twins. Andrea was massive. There were 2 humans inside of her. We just had no idea how different they were going to be. They just turned 10 2 weeks ago. And then 18 to 19, very surprising months later, here comes Blake. And so we have Lauren, compassionate, sweet, and then we have the trio of terror sort of right there behind her. Andrea and I are both CPAs by trade who now are doing different things. She stays home full time. I'm obviously in the internet safety space. So we just tend to think that most things in life make more sense in a spreadsheet. Anybody believe, like, you're with me, you're tracking with me on that left brain analytics? Anybody else? That wasn't in a spreadsheet. Okay, no life plan, no goals, no what we want to do after we get married. That wasn't ever on any list. But here's where I find myself. So I speak to you out of a position of a lot of research, a lot of experience with families, having worked in ministry, both in a paid and a volunteer capacity for almost 2 decades. But you know what? I'm living it. Like, I'm living it. My daughter just got her first iPhone back in December as a 15-year-old. Right? She just got her first social media account at 15 just last month. And here I am navigating some of these things too. Now, that's a whole different story. If you want to know more about how did we get to 15 before that happened, because I know that can sometimes be a real challenge, that's a whole separate conversation. But friends, I'm living this with you, and I want you to know that. And so I'm going to point often to our website, Protect Young Minds. We do a lot of things, whether it's presentations. I'm going to point you to some resources, because I don't want this to be a one-time event. If we're going to change culture and change the way that we talk about technology from parents to kids, it can't just be a one-time event. So I want to keep you connected to some helpful resources that I'll point you towards as we get going. The website here is a place where we do a ton of work, right? We built Protect Young Eyes 4.5 years ago because I had a lot of parents who were coming to me saying 2 primary things. Chris, I don't know where to go and I don't have time to find out. So having been a consultant for a number of years with ENY who likes to fix problems, I said, great, we can fix this problem. Let's do the research, put it all in one place. Now, we don't live in the matrix. I can't plug you in and just download it. You still have to go, but we've done the hard work. Like, friends, hour upon hour, we are scrubbing the internet for different trends and things that are changing, parental controls, what's the new this or that, what the risks are, what are the positive ways in which kids are using technology, what we as adults need to change about our own online behaviors in order to model well to our kids. We're doing all of that all week long so that you have one place to go. And so I want the website to be a resource for you. I'm going to point to it multiple times during my talk tonight so that you can go, oh, I want to know more about that screen time topic, and I'll show you where to go. Okay? Ways to stay connected. We are very active through social media, whether it's through our Facebook page, Instagram, Twitter. We have Twitter because you kind of have to. I kind of want to blow up Twitter. I don't really like it. It's turned all of us into extremists, 240 characters at a time without any conversation, but that's a whole separate soapbox. You can also simply text the word protect to the number 66866, or you can take a photo of, if they got it on there, there's a QR code on our note-taking guide, right? These are ways, this is a free weekly newsletter that will go out tomorrow morning that again shows you the digital trends. So you can go to the website, you can visit us on social media, or if you want some old school email, we'll give you that too. Again, ways to stay in touch, because who has time to do all the research? Do you? Yes or no? No, right? So let us do that for you, and we'll send it to you so that you can then apply it to your own situation. So I want to share with you just a little story about my youngest son, Blake, right? Blake, he's the 4th child in a decent-sized family. So as the 4th child, you have to kind of be a survivor, right? You just hope that you're found at the end of most days, right? That we fed you and took care of you because we're so busy with so many other things. Blake has typically been good at a lot of stuff. He's really bright in school, really good with English and math and those kinds of things. Now, he's in 2nd grade, but back when Blake was in kindergarten, every single day in kindergarten, when they came in, they wrote a journal entry in their kindergarten journals, okay? Now, there's already a really special spot for kindergarten teachers. God love them. But being a kindergarten teacher who reads kindergarten journals must be one of the most entertaining jobs on earth. And so this is what they did every single day. We, Andrea and I, went in conferences for Blake, and his teacher, Mrs. Rossman, showed us one of Blake's entries from his kindergarten journal. And it was in this moment that I was presented with a really important truth when it comes to technology. Okay, this is what Blake wrote. Now first, let's admire that for a 5-year-old, that's pretty good handwriting, right? Okay, now let's judge the substance of these well-formed letters. Yesterday I watched Duck Dynasty. The people were doing karate. The people were doing boxing. The kids were punching and kicking Willie in the nuts. It was rock and roll. There he is, ha ha ha, in his little easy chair, watching the gray TV there. And it was in this moment, a man who is typically not short of words, it was in this moment that I had no idea what to say. Like, half of me as a parent thought I'm probably supposed to punish him, but the other half of me just wanted to kind of give him a high five. Like, that was pretty funny. And I said to Andrea, I was like, okay, I obviously don't want Blake writing the kids were punching and kicking Willie in the stuff. But I said, what 5-year-old writes it was rock and roll? Like, that was the part to me that was most shocking. And it was in that moment that I realized that no matter how hard I try, I cannot control all of the digital influences impacting my son. Am I right? Right? Get it out of your head right now. You cannot control all of the ways in which technology is going to impact your kid. Right? So are you giving him or her tools to deal with the situations when you're not there? Because you can't control it all. I was confronted with that truth very, very clearly at one kindergarten conference, okay? Back, you heard Todd mention that back in July, I had the opportunity to speak in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee. They were holding a hearing on July 9th on protecting childhood innocence, and I was called as one of the witnesses, which was both a phenomenal, but probably one of the most terrifying experiences that I've ever had, that for 2 hours being asked questions. Now, this was a bipartisan hearing, so it wasn't some of the grillings that you've seen on C-SPAN, where there's maybe a little bit more of an adversarial partisan situation going on. That's not this at all, because when it comes to protecting young people, that's one of those few places where we can still all agree on things. And so it was a great experience. Now, just based on the composition of the audience here tonight, I am not going to play the entire hearing, but what I would invite you to do, moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas, what I would invite you to do, I want you to write this down, okay? I want you to, at home later on, I want you to Google C-SPAN, right? So C-SPAN space McKenna. That's my last name, M-C-K-E-N-N-A. And right away, the video of the hearing will pop up. Now, it's a 2-hour video. That's how long it was. I don't want you to watch the whole thing. But what I want you to do is I want you to go to about the 16-minute mark of this video. And I want you to watch my 6-minute opening statement. Each one of the 5 witnesses got to present an opening statement, which is where I took 4 years of gut-wrenching research that we've done at Protect Young Eyes and put it into a 6-minute speech. It was something that I worked on for months, looking at all that we've done to understand social media and addiction and pornography and predation and how that is impacting kids today. And so I want you to go ahead and take a look at that. Now, here's the thing. You all have to promise me something right now. In fact, I want you all to kind of say it after me. I want you to repeat after me. I promise. No, you're not feeling it. You got it. That was not good enough. I promise to watch this video and not freak out. Because the things in this video aren't what all kids do. Okay, you can stop repeating after me. See, what I don't want you to do is take these things in this video and just extrapolate it to every young person that you know, including the ones that are in your house. I had 6 minutes to capture the attention of the U.S. Senate. Therefore, I told them a lot of the worst things that we have found online. But I don't want you to apply those things and just assume that every single young person that you care for is making these kinds of decisions. There is nothing in my testimony that is untrue, though. It is all actual things that I have experienced, which means that they are all possibilities for every single kid who uses the internet, but it may not be what your kid is doing, okay? So I want you to go ahead and watch that. So in your note-taking guide, you're going to have a couple of sets of lines, right, that are side by side. When it comes to raising kids in the digital age, there are certain things, this is like me sort of telling you the end of the story before we get there. There are certain things that I want present in every single home in order to create digital trust. We, as parents and caring adults, need to be taking whatever opportunities we can to be making deposits in the digital trust bank that each of our kids has. And this is often difficult for us because generationally we don't always understand the things they're doing online. We didn't grow up with it. We have different experiences than they do. But these are some of the words that I think characterize a home that is winning when it comes to building a bridge of digital trust with your kids. They are the things that you see on the left-hand side of the screen here in the circles. And in contrast to that are some of the things that I think erase or take withdrawals out of that digital trust bank. Number one there is curiosity. I want us to be insanely curious about how our kids use technology. I know you don't always understand it. I know you don't always get why they watch that type of YouTube video. I know you don't always understand why they like that particular social media platform or that particular filter or face, whatever it is as they send their snaps, all that stuff. I want you to be curious about it. Not condemning, not like, oh, that's stupid. Get in there and understand why they enjoy it. I used to work a lot with adults when I was in ministry. I used to say that if you want to know what's important to an adult, look at where they spend their time and where they spend their money. If you want to know what's important to a kid today, look at where they click and ask them why they click there. If you want to know some of the deep questions that young people have, their insecurities, the things that they're just wondering about, then look at how they use technology through a lens of, wow, I want to learn from that. I'm not going to take it away. I'm not going to smash it. I'm not going to just judge you. I want to learn from you. Why is it that you love that sort of thing? Get insanely curious. Have conversations. Many times this wasn't modeled to us, right? As a Gen X parent like myself, and some of you can maybe relate to that, growing up in the 80s, raised by boomer parents. We didn't have a lot of intimate conversations about a lot of awkward things. We were kind of left to figure a lot of that out on our own. We don't have that luxury in the digital age. Because if you don't talk to them, then YouTube will. And YouTube's office hours are 24/7. You must look the young people that you care for in the eye and talk to them about all of the awkward things that nobody talked to you about when you were growing up. There is no such thing as passive parenting in the digital age. There is no such thing as passive grandparenting in the digital age. There is no such thing as passive aunting or uncling. I don't think those are words in the digital age. We must jump in and we must look them in the eye and talk about these things. That includes co-playing things with them. If you have a kid who's a gamer, get in and play with them. As I was telling some friends of mine earlier, one of my most favorite times of night is when me and my 8-year-old son Blake and my 10-year-old son Cole sit down shoulder to shoulder and we play Super Smash Brothers on the Switch. Guess what? They beat me almost every single time. I no longer can beat my 8-year-old at the Nintendo. This is a very humbling position to be in. But you know what? During that little bit of time that we have, I learned a ton about my boys. Because if I sit Blake down in front of me and I say, hey Blake, how was your day today? Hey Blake, what'd you do in school today? Nothing. Right, kind of a pretty typical answer, right? But man, if I'm shoulder to shoulder and this kid's thumbs are moving, all of a sudden his mouth starts moving. And I get all kinds of information. I get all kinds of insight into what sort of competitiveness, sort of his emotions, where he's at. Co-play shows me things about my kid that I can't get otherwise. Does that make sense? Right? Get in there and play it with them, right? Caring control. We often hear the words parental control. That's sort of a word that's used to characterize a lot of different apps and things that are out there. I think it's the wrong way to talk about it. Parental control creates this divide, this sort of tension between my way or the highway. And you, son or daughter, have no say in how we are going to use this thing called the internet well in our house. What about inviting them into some of those decisions? Now, I get it. For a young kid, and you just want to block stuff and that's the right thing to do, I get it. you get to make that decision. But as they get older, as they're into junior high and into high school, invite them into that decision, right? In other words, if one of the rules in the house is you, son or daughter, you can't have technology in your bedroom, how about as a family, we decide, so that I don't look like a hypocrite, that mom and dad can't have technology in their bedroom either. And I'm going to take the iPhone out of the room, and I'm no longer going to put myself to sleep every night playing Candy Crush because I bought an old school alarm clock, because if that rule is good for you, then it's probably good for me too. Right? When we invite our sons and our daughters into these decisions, it almost always goes better. Same thing's true in marriage, right? Whenever it's their idea and not yours, it almost always goes better, right? So I think we have an opportunity to do that. And then finally, copy me. Adults, this one is for you. Kids, this isn't you. Teens, this isn't you. This is just for the adults in the room. Would you want the young people that you care for to use their technology exactly like you do? Watching the things that you watch, visiting the websites that you visit, staring at the screen for as long as you do. I've just come to realize that even though I'm 45 years old, just about everything that I do on the internet, I should be able to show a 12-year-old. And if that's the spot I'm in, then I'm probably in a good spot. Would you want your kids copying how you use technology? We're going to unpack that a little bit more in just a few minutes. So these are the things that I think characterize a home that is putting deposits in that digital bank. And on the opposite side, you can see what those words are, which stand in contrast. So when it comes to some of the conversations, let's get really practical for just a minute, because at Protect Young Eyes, we pride ourselves on providing as many practical tips and tools as possible. When it comes to the conversations, right, one of the very first conversation pieces that parents come to me with is, what's the right age to talk to my kids about pornography? This is like one of the number one conversations that parents don't know how to have. When parents come to me with this question, I usually answer it this way. I say to them, you know what? I don't know you and I don't know your kid, but they're ready before you are, so let's get it done. I say, I don't know you and I don't know your kid, but if they're 6 and they ride a school bus, then they probably need to know the word. Because I want them to hear it from you long before they hear it from the 8th grader in the front with an unprotected iPhone in a situation where the adult-to-child ratio is 40-1. It's up to us as parents to jump into this conversation. Now, I'm going to point to some ways in which we can do that, but first I want to show you this screen here. Anytime throughout the rest of the talk where you see sort of an image or logo and a title, this represents a blog post. You can go to protectingeyes.com, click on blog, you can search the little magnifying glass in the upper right-hand corner, and you can find this blog post. And this is where I unpack very real situations with my own kids and talking to them very early about this topic. Where again, my youngest son, Blake, he was sitting at the kitchen counter and he had the iPad in front of him. Now, Blake has always been a kid who loves to game, he loves screens, he loves that stuff. We have to watch him with that. And he had the iPad in front of him. And I said, hey, Blake, you love technology, right? He's like, yeah, Dad, I do. I'm like, I know you do. I said, Blake, listen. You know what your private parts are, don't you? He's like, well, yeah. He's a 5-year-old boy. Of course he does, okay? If you've raised sons, you know what I'm talking about, okay? Yes, Dad, I know what my private parts are. Okay, good. Blake, if you are ever on the computer and you ever see anything scary or anything you don't understand, if you ever see someone else's private parts, you know, that part of the body that's under a bathing suit, you know what I want you to do? And he's like, what? What is Dad going to tell me next? I said, I want you to do 2 things. Put it down and tell someone. That's it. Can you do that for me? Repeat after me. Put it down, tell someone, tell someone. Really simple. And as often as I could remember to have that conversation with him, I'd ask him, hey, Blake, you ever see anything scary on the computer? You ever see private parts on the computer? What do? And he'd say, Dad, put it down and tell someone. And I'd ask him that over and over again, to the point where he was like, I know, Dad, I know. And that goes to something that I say to parents. When it comes to important technology conversations, if they aren't annoyed at you yet that you're asking them, then you're not having the conversation enough. Because in a world that is constantly spitting information to them, right, through constant notifications, through the constant nature of technology, you need to be a slightly more constant voice so that you're the default and not that voice. Does that make sense? And so as often as I could remind Blake that, we reminded him of that. And I said, okay, Blake, if mom or dad aren't around, obviously you can come and tell us. And Blake, I will never be upset. No matter what you see on the internet, you can always land safely with me. Kids need to know that. Like those exact words. And I said, Blake, if mom or dad aren't ever around, who are some other someones who you could tell? And I made him create a list. Because remember, you're not always there. And so he made a list. Yep, Grandma McKenna, Aunt Susie, I can tell Lauren, it's his older sister. Great! You got it, buddy. He had a whole list of someones, other than mom or dad, that he could tell in case you ran into something scary, private part, something on the computer. Now, friends, if this is a tactic, a strategy that you put in place in your house, let me give you one very important word of advice. Whoever your son or daughter puts on the someone list, make sure that all of those people know that they are on the someone list, okay? This is a really important step because the last thing that I want to have happen is when Blake is at Grandma's house and Grandma has no idea of any of this, and Blake is maybe watching Netflix on Grandma's iPad. Grandma, private parts on your iPad. I don't need Grandma flipping out, okay? I don't need my mom like having a heart attack right there, all right? Now, it's easy for us to laugh about that, but there's a really, really important reason why Grandma can't freak out. See, my mom, Grandma McKenna, Blake loves his Grandma McKenna. Blake would never want to do anything that makes Grandma McKenna upset. And if Blake, in doing the exact thing that Dad has told him is the right thing to do, causes Grandma McKenna to be upset, that now tells Blake a very confusing message. And he all of a sudden thinks that he did something wrong, even though he did exactly what I asked him to do. And you know what, friends? At some point in Blake's life, it will happen again. And that second time, he won't quite know what to do. And whether you are 4, 14, or 40, there is no such thing as a good digital secret. And so it's really important for my mom to know exactly how to respond, to know what the protocol is. To say, Blake, great job. Thank you so much for doing exactly the right thing. High five. That must have been a little weird to see that. No problem. Your dad will talk to you about that later so that he knows the very next time that that's a safe conversation to have. Does that make sense, friends? That's so, so important. Shame is not just an adult issue. Shame is something that young people deal with too. We have to do whatever we can to fend that off. And so this is a blog post that talks about that if you want to read more about it. That's the relational side of having that conversation. The technical side of that conversation is I want to help you do whatever you can to block as much porn as possible from ever entering the digital devices in your house. And there's a way to do that through something called clean DNS. A lot of us don't realize it, but every single time we're typing information into a search engine, that search engine is translating those words into numbers and then heading out into hyperspace to connect with servers to find what we're looking for. And there's a way, be it through the router or through each device individually, to point all of those searches towards servers, or if you want to think of them like digital phone books that don't have pornography in them. One of those services that you may be familiar with is called OpenDNS. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of OpenDNS, right? This is a clean DNS service. One that I find to be incredibly helpful for my own family, which was created by a friend of mine out in California, is one called Clean Browsing. If you take your note-taking guide and turn it over onto the back, you're going to see the little fox logo next to Clean Browsing. This is another clean DNS solution that solves some of the loopholes that exist in OpenDNS, built by a dad for his own kids, and it's spectacular. Now, this is one of the more technical solutions that we recommend. Again, we pride ourselves on being practical, but I want you to read this blog post. This blog post is read by far more than any other page on our website, by almost 6,000 people every single week. And I want it to be a resource to you. And if you're still confused after you read it, then find somebody in your community, your neighborhood, your church that can help you. And if no one can help you there, then just find a 7th grader. And then change the password when they're done, okay? But I'm kind of serious, right? A great way to kind of in that caring, control, that partnership to say, you know what? I want all of us to not have access to this stuff, not just you. Can you help me figure this out? And that's a great way to invite them into that conversation, okay? So that's just an example of some of the things that we promote at Protect Young Eyes to encourage parents and grandparents like you to have the kinds of conversations that maybe you just don't naturally know how to have. Again, you can read about that and other topics on our blog. As you heard from Todd, he used to be a CPA, so sometimes numbers for us left-brain spreadsheet types makes sense. I want to share some numbers with you. 27%, according to research done by the Reward Foundation this past summer, 27% represents on the unfiltered internet the percentage of video content that is explicit or pornographic on the unfiltered internet. We must do whatever we can to prevent young people, particularly in elementary school and below, from having access to the unfiltered internet. Now, 27%, you're like, well, that's not a very big number, right? If I'm a 27% free throw shooter, that's pretty stinky. If my grade is based on a 27% average, that's pretty stinky. You're right. But when it comes to the internet, 27% is a massive number. To put it in analog terms for just a minute, imagine for just a minute that back in the 80s when I was growing up, there was a coffee table in our living room. And my dad put out 4 magazines every morning, one of them pornographic, 3 of them not. And just hoping throughout the day that I didn't look at the wrong one. That is what the unfiltered internet represents. And when young people have access to the unfiltered internet, and when young people start to see pornography over and over again, sadly, young people are the ones hurting other young people based on what they're seeing online. You're seeing this trend when you speak to nurses at children's hospitals all over the country, and in places like the Children's Assessment Center, where other kids are abusing other kids. In our minds, we often stereotypically think of some adult. The greatest risk to our kids today is other kids abusing other kids based on what they're seeing online. And I think we lose sight of that sometimes. There's a lot of reasons for that, scientifically and neurologically, why kids are doing that to each other. Again, I need to point you to the blog post to dig into it. This is based on research done at these hospitals. So that points us then to ask ourselves, have I had the right conversations with the right kids, right? 81,055, here's another number, according to Internet Live Stats, which you can go to any day. The last time I checked it was on October 24th. This represents the number of unique YouTube videos that is watched every single second of every single day. That there are over 300 hours of new video content uploaded to YouTube every minute. There is no possible way that that organization can hire enough moderators to keep that stuff clean. So a big question I need to ask you is, how's YouTube doing in your house? YouTube is fabulous and has all kinds of great things. I would be even a worse handyman than I am today without YouTube. Okay? Anybody agree with me on that? All right? All kinds of great things there. But friends, at the end of the day, YouTube doesn't care about your kids. Neither does YouTube's algorithm. Right? And so we have to understand that different platforms have different ways of controlling YouTube. And is YouTube under control? Do you understand the difference between YouTube and YouTube Kids? You can read about both of them, both through the blog post here. And if you go to the app section of Protect Young Eyes, you would find a whole write-up about some of the parental controls that exist in YouTube Kids. Parents will sometimes ask me, okay, well, what do you think about YouTube Kids? My response is this: any app that has the word YouTube in it, I don't trust it. I swear nobody at Google has children. Everything they do makes my life more difficult. All of their apps are difficult to control, and YouTube is controlled by Google, in case you didn't know that. YouTube is the second largest search engine on earth behind Google. Did you know that? Bigger than every other one out there. It is the #1 app used by kids today. It's not Snapchat, it's not Instagram, it's YouTube. If you spend any time with your young people, you would know this, right? So that's the question we have to ask ourselves. Are YouTube and YouTube Kids under control in my house? All right, now, if you're keeping track in your note-taking guide there, we've got some trends that I want to jump into, 3 of them, and then hopefully at the end we'll have a little bit of time for some Q&A. I think we're doing all right. So digital trend #1, if you're into filling in blanks there, you can copy this down, but the ubiquity of technology. means that there's no such thing as tech-free. Meaning that with almost 90% of teens owning a smart device, this is a statement out of my testimony to the Senate Judiciary Committee. I said with almost 90% of teens owning a smart device, a simple ride on the bus or a visit to a friend's house can expose a child to life-altering content. Never before in human history have young people had the ability to so radically change the trajectory of each other's lives so quickly. Right? We have to leave the ignorance of the land of if. You can't control it all. You can't control it all. We have to embrace the reality of the when. It's only a matter of when all of the things you hope never happen eventually happen to your kid online. So I think an important question is, make a list. Is your kid ready for all of the digital whens? And to know that, what I want you to do is I want you to make a list of all of the horrible things that you hope never happen to your kid online. And then I want you to talk to all of your kids about all of those things in an age-appropriate way. I want their understanding of online situations to come from you first. I want you to be the default search. I want you to be the safe place that they land. I want you to be the trusting person that they come to when they have questions, and not a YouTube search. But that starts because you've already initiated the conversation. If you've never initiated it, they don't know to come to you, okay? Talk to them. Another question along those lines of appropriateness is this one, right? What's the right age to give my kids social media? It touches on that conversational piece that I showed you in that circle earlier, but it also touches on this idea of everybody's got it, so when's the right age to give it to my kid? I wish I had a concrete answer, right? It's so easy to parent to a number, isn't it? Like if I knew that my kid was 14 years and 2 months old and they were all automatically ready, that'd be an easy place to parent to, am I right? Yes or no? Absolutely, but it just doesn't exist that way. We have to look at our kids individually and based on certain attributes, ask ourselves whether or not they are ready for these environments, friends, that were made by adults for adults, and we're dropping teenagers in them all the time. This blog post here goes through a number of more qualitative attributes, not just age. Age is about the fourth thing that I care about when trying to determine whether or not a kid is ready for social media. Like if I were trying to figure out whether or not somebody was ready for social media, I might do something like this. I might say, hey, do you mind if I hop down here for just a second? You're, okay, good. You don't mind? Hi, my name is Mr. McKenna. Nice to meet you. Louis, very nice to meet you. Awesome handshake, awesome eye contact. Somebody has taught you how to do that, haven't they? Well done. Yes, sir. This is my buddy right here, man. This guy's got it right here. On the spot, he had no idea I was jumping down here, right? One of the things that I look at in trying to determine whether or not a kid is ready for social media is this. If I walk up to your son or daughter and I look him or her in the eye and he or she can't kind of respond back to me, can't kind of look me in the eye, can't kind of shake my hand. In other words, if they don't know how to navigate the face-to-face, then they are not ready to navigate the screen-to-screen. I want the relational template on which face-to-face communication happens is to be built face-to-face before it's built face-to-screen. That template happens intentionally. That template is taught. Louis's been taught that. Have you taken opportunities to actually put your kids in situations where they're a little uncomfortable and relationally they have to kind of figure things out? I do this all the time when we're at church. We go to a large congregation and I'll be talking to somebody and Blake or Cole will walk up to me and I'll stop the conversation and I'll say, hey Blake, can you introduce yourself? And they'll say, hi, I'm Blake, and the person will introduce himself. And it's also a really sneaky way to figure out the person's name if I forgot it. Like that's an old pastor trick, okay, just FYI. But Blake will introduce himself, and it's a little bit of practice afterwards. Be like, hey, buddy, that was good. Kind of lock the thumb next time. Louis can give some good instructions. He's got it down, right? Lock the thumb. Just kind of look at him. I'm constantly coaching him and what some of those human-to-human interactions look like. Friends, whether you believe in creation or evolution or a little bit of both, our brains respond differently human to human than they do human to screen. We are intended to relate to each other face to face. There's something different that happens when you give me a hug. My brain responds to you differently. It actually releases certain neurochemicals from that hug. Why? Who knows? We all have different explanations for that. But if I'm talking to you on FaceTime, your face is on the screen, and I rub your face on my screen, on my face, it doesn't do anything to me except weird you out, okay? I am not getting a dose of oxytocin or nothing going on, right? We weren't wired for that, friends. Let's teach our kids how to do that. And I go through all kinds of funny examples of that. So again, if that's a question you've got, this blog post is not going to lead you to a distinct, okay, if my kid is this age, but it's going to give you some qualitative things to look for so you can say, yeah, they're more or less ready. For some kids, it's 8th grade. For others, that might not be till they get a driver's license. It just kind of depends on the kid, right? Digital trend number 2 is this one, that most of the apps your kids like were designed for addiction, not safety. Most of the apps that your kids like today were not designed for them. They were designed for addiction and not safety. Sorry, if you were copying that down, I want to give you a chance to put that in. In other words, when we look at the ways in which apps were put together, they were intended to grab as much of my attention as possible, often at the expense of me as a human being. Now, I want to show you a short video here. This is from a gentleman named Sean Parker. He's going to be up on the screen here in just a minute. But friends, what he's going to point to is that it's not that bad kids are making bad choices. It's more often that good kids are being dropped in digital playgrounds with features that they're just not ready for. And if we're really honest as adults, some of these features are impacting us in negative ways too, right? So here's our guy right here. He was at a conference with Axios here, and he was one of the original founders of Facebook back with Mark Zuckerberg, and I want you to listen to how he describes himself, right? He doesn't call himself a computer guy. He doesn't call himself an entrepreneur. He calls himself something very interesting that I want you to listen to in this news. Any app that allows human beings to connect with each other, that also has young people using it, is always going to have predatory activity. So what's a parent to do? Here's the question. Does your son or daughter know how to walk away from a nice predator? Unfortunately, some of the most horrible people on the internet are also some of the nicest people on the internet. They know exactly how to talk to your kids. Now, granted, a very small percentage, based on our surveys of kids in elementary and middle school, less than 25%, but it's still 25%, are approached by people who they don't know online. I want you to ask this question. And if the answer to this question is no, then you have 24 hours to make it right. You have 24 hours to get them up to speed. In other words, we have to give our nice kids permission not to talk to nice people they don't know online so that they become predator-proof. A lot of nice kids don't know how to walk away from a nice question. So we've written a lot about that. This is a blog post where we give all kinds of different examples of tricky questions, right, that you can put in front of your kid to say, hey, if somebody ever says this to you, this is what I want you to do. You can even use the same 2 phrases that I talked about earlier when teaching your kids about porn. Put it down and tell someone. The great thing about those phrases is that whether it's porn or predators, it works for both situations, right? Put it down and tell someone. So you're a nice kid. And I'm guessing this is a room full of families with a lot of nice kids. But I also want them to be safe, right? And so when it comes to that safety, and this is no secret here, that Instagram was named by CNN as the leading social media platform for child grooming. And friends, there's been all kinds of research done on this. Even just this morning, right here in the Atlanta area, maybe some of you are familiar with a technology organization called Bark. They were featured on Good Morning America for the research that they did for a viral piece where they impersonated young girls and then just were overwhelmed by the amount of predatory activity that just showered these fake accounts. That was featured on GMA this morning, right? And we did some of our own testing in that area. I'm going to get past it just to get into this blog post here. Same thing, where we did testing of our own, friends. It's not that bad kids are doing bad things on Instagram. It's that Instagram was not made with safety in mind. Instagram was not designed through the lens of 13-year-olds. Therefore, if we're going to drop 13-year-olds into the digital playground called Instagram, you better make sure that they're ready to deal with risks that a 30-year-old might struggle with, let alone a 13-year-old, when it comes to temptation and people reaching out and showing you all kinds of things that eyeballs just shouldn't see, okay? Again, it's not bad kids. We just have to understand that these apps weren't necessarily made for them, so we have to make them ready. Now, Snapchat is a blast. I have a ton of opinions about Snapchat. I'm not saying that it's evil. I'm just saying that if you are 14 or 40, if you're constantly in a digital environment where what you send to somebody else disappears, eventually you're going to make a mistake. Let's quit being surprised when young people make bad choices on Snapchat. Neurologically, friends, if you had Snapchat when you were growing up, you'd have done all the exact same stupid stuff. Let's just be honest. It's so easy for us to judge them and get mad, and yes, sometimes they do things that make us upset. But I'm telling you, you would have done the exact same thing. Right? This is not an app that was built for them. This was an app built by college students, Evan and his friends at Stanford, so they could send things that disappear. Eventually, 14-year-olds are going to do something stupid on Snapchat if we give it to them. Okay? If you're going to give your kids Snapchat, at least make them ready for it. At least help them understand what some of those temptations are. It's a blast. There's all kinds of great things in it, right? There's the Snap Streak, which can be good or bad, and keeping in touch. Know what Snap Map is, so you know that you can show your location. Know that in the Discover News section, there's all kinds of stuff in there that you can't turn off. And if you want to have a blast, then give Grandma the ostrich filter and sit back and laugh, okay? Right? There's a lot of positive things and fun things in Snapchat. Just understand that it wasn't an app that was built with them in mind. And there are also risks that come with it. We got to make them ready. I want you to think about social media like training wheels, right? We don't take our kid to the top of the tallest hill in the neighborhood and push on day one. We do all kinds of things with training wheels and with grassy surfaces and helmets and bubble wrap and all these things to keep our kids safe, just teaching them how to ride a bicycle. What if we took that same very intentional approach with how we teach our kids how to use social media? I do think that teenagers can use it well. It's just very, very few of them are going to arrive at that naturally. We need to show them how. So we've written a lot about the apps, all kinds of things. All right, I'm going to let you, if you want more information about Snapchat, just go into the blog and read all about it, okay? There's a lot more there. But I want to leave us a little bit of time, so here's the last digital trend. Number 3 is this. The parents are still the key in whether or not a kid uses technology well. Parents, you are still the key in whether or not a kid uses technology well. Your words, your actions, be conversational, be curious, right? Would you want them using their devices just like you do? I touched on this earlier. I've got to hit it again, right? Because the number one complaint that I get from kids is this, is that you use your devices more than they do. I hear that from teens all the time. Now, I understand that sometimes the things that teenagers tell me I need to divide it by 2 and multiply it by 0.1 to get to the truth, but there's an element of truth to it, even if it's not quite as big as how they exaggerated it to me. And if we're honest, we probably have some things to learn, right? All right, I want to get to this. Other questions that parents ask us is this. Number 1, what's the right parental control solution? Flip over your note-taking guide to the very back. You're going to see different parental control solutions. Different solutions that we have tested, that we trust. Not every one is going to work well for your family. Some do, some don't. I just tend to think that most of the families that we speak to are able to find some kind of solution or a combination of solutions that will help their family on this page. Now, if you already have a parental control solution in place and you don't see it on this list, that doesn't mean that it's bad and that you should change it. If it works for you, great. The point is to have something in place. The point is to be monitoring in some way, in an age-appropriate way, right? More for younger kids, less for older kids, eventually to the point where you shouldn't have to do that much at all because they're going to move out of the house and have to navigate it without you at some point, right? But find something that works. Talk about the why. Why are we doing this, right? In other words, if Covenant Eyes is good for my phone, And for my daughter's phone, right, we're doing this together. Not only does Lauren have that on her device, but I also have it on mine. Why? Because it's important for my daughter to know that even dad needs a little bit of help using technology well. That's something that communicates to her that we're in this together. That's something that communicates, to her a little bit of trust that it's not just her, right? Someday when she's older, she'll hear more of my story about some of the really bad choices that I made online that almost destroyed my marriage, right? But for now, all she needs to know is that dad needs covenant eyes just like she does. And that's important that we're doing that together. So if you have questions about any of those solutions on there, there's even some books on there if you want to know how to have the pornography conversation. There's some good books to guide you through that. Again, these are resources. We've whittled it down. There are hundreds of resources out there. We just whittled it down to a shorter list so that you're not overwhelmed with too many choices, okay? That's one of the questions we get. I want to go to this last one here. This is maybe the final question before I'll answer a few questions from you guys. One of the other questions that we get from parents is this: okay, what's the right amount of screen time or gaming for my kid? Anybody ever ask that question in your house? Yes or no? Yeah, right? This is like the perpetual question that we get right now. I feel like screen time is sort of like the new wine, right? It used to be that you would read an article that would say, drink a lot of wine because it'll make you live longer. And then the next week you read an article that would say, quit drinking wine and then you'll live longer. And then the week after that you saw another article that said, drink a lot of wine. And like every other week you're getting this contradictory message on what am I supposed to do? And I feel like the same thing is happening with screen time right now. We have one article that comes out from the New York Times back this fall which says, get all the kids off of screen time because it's delaying their reading. And then they publish something in December that says, parents, quit freaking out about screen time. I'm like, what in the world are we supposed to believe? And like most things, somewhere in the middle is probably where we need to land. And when you look at all of the research that is out there, whether it's from the World Health Organization or from different pediatric associations, they have slightly different opinions on some things, but they all have three things in common that I want us to pay attention to. Number one, almost everyone agrees that less is better. Whatever that happens to be in your house, that less is better. Number two, they all agree that children under 2 should have almost zero sedentary screen time. The New York Times piece, in a peer-reviewed piece of study that was published back in September, for kids up to age 5, they're saying that too much time on tablets actually delays their reading acquisition, okay? So for young kids, we eliminate as much of it as possible. And that third one, you guys see it up there, right? That the number one determinant of how a kid uses technology is how adults use technology. You are showing them the way. Right? And you can look at all the different ways that we have unpacked that. This is that blog post. We look at the studies from the American Pediatric Association, these articles in the New York Times, World Health Organization, and it's all sort of summarized right there. One of the other ways that I challenge parents when it comes to screen time is this: what happens when you take it away? If every single time you take a device away, your son or daughter turns into an alter, rage-filled version of him or herself, then they're probably getting too much screen time. Right? Step it back to a point where there isn't this sort of adhesion emotionally that's going on with the device. I had to do this with Blake, right? In fact, I would test him. He'd be right in the middle of a 3-minute round of Super Smash Brothers. And if I interrupted that round, it was volcanic eruption, and it was the end of the world. I had to sit down with him and say, hey, Blake, listen, it's a 3-minute round of Super Smash Brothers. You know what? You can play another one. And what I would do over time is I would intentionally interrupt him. He'd be in the middle of another game, be like, hey, Blake, I need you upstairs for something real quick. You got to stop the game right now. And it finally got to the point where he could pause his game and he could come up and help me. Right? Teaching him that it's not the end of the world. To have some control over those emotions when I told him to put it down. And so we have a little phrase in our house that goes like this: if you get mad when I take it away, whatever you're playing is gone for at least a day. And I want you to try to figure out for yourself, buddy, how to control a little bit of that, right? And if I take it away from you, it's not the end of the world, man. It's okay. You're going to be all right, okay, buddy? So those are some of the things that we believe. All right, let's summarize. We've talked about a lot of stuff. That is about as fast as I can give you a day-long seminar in 61 minutes, all right? But here's where we've been, just to sort of wrap it all up, right? We've got the relational steps over here. Hopefully those made sense. And then on this side, these are the technical things, the more important technical things that we've talked about that have been sprinkled throughout the presentation here, right? We need to assess the router, right, to make sure, whether it's through clean DNS, that we're blocking as much of the porn as possible. Let me tell you this, if you haven't replaced your router in the past 5 years, it's time. It's the best $250 that you're gonna spend. And there's some that we recommend on our website under devices and wireless routers where you can, oftentimes you can find one that does multiple of these things for you, right? That you can get a router that then allows you to lock in YouTube restricted mode, which is what we want kids to be using, is YouTube in restricted mode if they're not in high school yet. And you can also block with a clean DNS solution. So sometimes with the right router, you can take care of all three of those at once. If you're an Android family, you should know a thing about Family Link. If you're an Apple family, you should know some things about screen time. And then maybe in addition to those things, you layer on an additional layer, depending on the needs of your family, like Covenant Eyes or like Bark. Relational steps, technical steps. Friends, if you're doing well on this slide, chances are you're doing well with your kids in the digital age. These aren't things that happen just one time, are they? I'd love it if we could just have one conversation and be done. Long gone are the days of one talk. I grew up in that age. You did too. We can't let our kids grow up in that age. By having persistent and consistent conversations, I find that we tend to have kids who learn how to use technology well. Again, stay connected to us. That's us at Protect Young Eyes. So I will take a moment. I think I have like 1 or 2 minutes before I got to turn you loose to head to the other breakout sessions. Again, you can email me anytime, but are there 1 or 2 questions that anybody wants to ask right now that I can do here in front of the whole audience? Yes, hi.
Hi, I'm a parent, but I'm also the principal of this school, so thank you for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. Hi.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
I have 2,563 kids that we're trying to monitor their phones. Is there a great message, or have you seen a positive result that school or an effective strategy school might use to work with kids in general, or is it a combination of kind of all this?
Yeah, so the question is, and you, sir, what's your name?
Jeff Cheney.
Okay, Mr. Cheney, the principal here at the high school. 2,500 kids. Man, I thought I had it rough with 4. Wow, right? I'm empathetic to the situation that a lot of school leaders find themselves in today, right? Where you're dealing with issues during 17 hours that you don't control a lot of days, okay? And so we love to jump into that space where we have a conversation with kids, plus having conversations with parents to sort of meet both sides of that, right? Whether it's through a live talk, whether it's through in-class conversation. I'm currently at a spot where I'm doing whatever I can to encourage as many schools as possible to remove personal electronic devices from the school, away for the day. We have a school up in Grand Rapids, Forest Hills Public School, a large school, 10,000 students spread out across 19 buildings. And their superintendent determined last year that he could not achieve the educational mission that the community had set forth in front of him in turning these students into lifelong learners while they had devices in their pockets. And so for the year 2019-2020, across all 19 schools, K through 12, all devices are away for the day. And the conversations, I've interviewed him twice now. Dan Beam, just a fabulous man, a fabulous leader. The things that he's sharing with me, the kids are reflecting back to him, right? Which first maybe started off a little bit adversarial. He is now having conversations like the one that he shared with me the other day with middle school students who love coming to school now. Why? Because they no longer have to spend an hour getting ready every morning for fear that someone's going to take their picture during the day. And they can just come to school and be themselves. He has these kinds of conversations now. So I think, and this is where I'm inviting schools where parents are honestly not holding up their end of the bargain with controlling devices. In Forest Hills, the school is leading the way. And what's happening now is parents are seeing the impact at home during the 17 hours when they're not at school, where kids want to be on their devices less because they love hanging out with their friends. It's this crazy thing. So I obviously have a lot of thoughts and a lot of just things that I'd love to say to schools around this topic. Whether they decide to keep technology, personal devices or not, it's just important to have very clearly communicated rules. Make sure that teachers in the classrooms are doing it the same way in every classroom, so that when I go from history to language arts, I don't have different expectations around what can I do with my AirPods versus this and that. Just as long as it's clear, be it having them or not having them, that's what's really important. And we love to come alongside schools with ideas and policies to help make that happen. So, sorry, that may have been more than you expected. I love that topic, though. I love that topic. Friends, that's probably all we have time for here today. Please do not hesitate to email me and ask other questions. We are a team that loves to help. Todd, you want to come up and just dismiss and send people off the next way?
Yes, thank you, everybody. All right, so we do